Fafo.
Does not deserve this. She's the sweetest person and she prayed for you.
A desperate plea to President Trump from a South Florida man fearing his life partner could be deported to Cuba at any moment. He reached out to our Christian De La Rosa to share his story and his remorse.
It's been 8 months. I didn't know a man could cry this much. I did not think that this would happen.
Wayne DeMario has been working overtime at a Southwest Miami-Dade guitar shop, trying to distract himself from his pain and regret.
I hate to see her going through this. She's my best friend.
His life partner of nearly 20 years, Yamile Alcantu, originally from Cuba, ICE detained her back in June.
He didn't think this would happen to him, that it would happen to other families, to other people, but not him. He voted for Trump all the way. MAGA.
8 months that she's been taken. I call it kidnapped because it basically is.
He says it happened during what they thought was just another immigration check-in.
They grabbed her, put her in shackles and chains.
She'd been checking in annually, as so many do, hoping to fix her status. She lost her legal residency and got a deportation order back in 2008 after a traffic stop.
They go through her purse, and then they dump the purse out, and 3 Xanax pills fall out.
But in those years, he says, they didn't think much of it.
Cuban's not going to get deported, so don't worry about it.
There are so many Latinos like this. It's not going to happen to me. I'm one of them. I'm a pick-me.
Today, DHS has her listed among the worst of the worst, a criminal arrested for dangerous drugs and possession. Wayne feels it's a slap in the face.
And don't forget, DHS already said that, we have some errors of those worst of the worst.
I didn't vote for this, but I definitely voted Republican.
He says both were staunch supporters of President Trump. When you said I didn't vote for this, what did you think you had voted for?
I really thought this was just going to be something organized, but it's obviously not. They just blanket everybody.
Alcantu, calling from her detention facility in Louisiana. She says in her 8 months detained, she has not seen an immigration judge. She stresses she's not a criminal, and her biggest fear, being deported, especially to Cuba. There are going to be people out there who hear your story, hear other stories like this, and say, well, you voted for this.
Yeah, I've heard that from people.
What do you tell those people?
I'm sorry. I didn't know that this was going to happen. This is about human beings. It's not about left or right. It's about right and wrong.
You know, you want to feel bad for people. You want to have empathy for them, and you want to be like, fuck, like this is awful that you're going through this. But I don't know. I'm going to go get a nice coffee. Does anybody want one?
Cubans who voted for Donald Trump are now regretting their vote as they are facing deportations. Many call it betrayal, as they never thought that this would affect them personally. At the same time, Cuba is facing a humanitarian crisis. There are reports of fuel shortage, power cuts, and basic services disrupted because of the oil blockade by the USA government. So let's have a look.
There is a humanitarian crisis happening in Cuba as we speak. There's no fuel. There's no electricity. There's no trash pickup. Trash is piling up on the streets, meaning disease could start to spread at any moment. The hospitals are not running at their capacity. They don't have staff that is showing up due to the working conditions, and some just can't get there because there's no fuel. There's a blockade happening by our government. And the Cubans for Trump, I have to ask, are y'all cool? Are y'all okay with what's happening? Because as I recall, just a couple of weeks ago, y'all were at Mar-a-Lago partying it up, enjoying yourselves, having a ball while this was happening. It's not funny because famine will begin to happen real soon. No water in a lot of places already. Are y'all cool? It's sad what's going on. And there's no humanitarian aid going there. They're blocking all of that. They block Russian ships. Canada is still debating whether or not they're going to assist, if they can. No aid. Make sure, you Cubans for Trump, make sure y'all tell y'all people that this is what you voted for. See, racism is expensive. Not just monetarily, but as you can see, humanitarily as well. Don't forget to tell them. I really pray and hope that something happens soon, because nobody wants to see another G-side happen. But this is what you voted for.
The Cuban government is talking with us, and they're in a big deal of trouble, as you know. They have no money, they have no anything right now, but they're talking with us, and maybe we'll have a friendly takeover of Cuba. We could very well end up having a friendly takeover of Cuba. We've had a lot of years of dealing with Cuba. I've been hearing about Cuba since I'm a little boy.
First Venezuela, now Iran, and then he said there's going to be a friendly takeover in Cuba.
Devastating news for Cuba and the Cuban people, as Donald Trump just admitted to reporters today that the U.S. is intent on invading and taking over Cuba. Donald Trump described it to reporters as a, quote, friendly takeover of Cuba. He says that Cuba is struggling, that the United States will go in there and conduct a friendly takeover. Well, I'm not sure how friendly that's going to be. We already saw Donald Trump's version of a friendly takeover in Venezuela that left over 80 Venezuelans dead as we bombed their capital city, kidnapped their president. Whether you like Maduro or not, we kidnapped the president of another country and put him in jail, yet Donald Trump pardoned the former president of Honduras, who was actually convicted for smuggling drugs into our country and other nations. So this is absolutely insane. What we're seeing in Cuba right now is absolutely inhumane, because Donald Trump is suffocating their country. They are letting the people of Cuba go hungry, starve, and die, all so that Donald Trump can expand his imperialist conquest and do the bidding of the military-industrial complex of Narco Rubio, Pete Kegsbreath, Howard Nutlick, and the whole rest of these goons that want to extend America's influence of power using the military, despite claiming to be the No New Wars, America First administration. What a sham. What a sham, and what a shame. This administration is a joke.
The American empire is going to starve 11 million people in Cuba. There's been an oil blockade by the U.S. for 15 days. They're oil dependent for everything. They have run out of oil completely. And one of their largest oil refineries in Havana mysteriously caught fire the other day. So even if they could get oil, they can't process it. Russia tried to bring them oil. The United States stopped them. We are about to witness one of the largest humanitarian crises in history in the Western Hemisphere. 11 million people are going to starve and die from disease. Their sewage is overrunning. There's no power. There's no running water. There's no clean water. And even if you brought in food, there's no way to cook it. They can't even. And it is 11 million people because of the U.S. imperialistic system and the Western Alliance. The England has said nothing. The rest of the UN are like condemning the actions. But we're splintering on all sides, all fronts. We have been fucking over everyone in this world for fucking hundreds of years. It always comes back to fucking capitalism, imperialism, and colonialism. Can we stop fucking the world and start helping people?
Right now, Cuba is going through one of its toughest periods in decades. Across the island, people are dealing with long power outages, fuel shortages, and disruptions to daily life. Part of the reason goes back decades. The US embargo on Cuba began in the early 1960s after the Cuban Revolution, when the Cuban government took over American-owned businesses and property on the island. Since then, the US government has kept economic limits in place, meaning restrictions on trade, money, and access to goods, as a way of pressuring the Cuban government over political freedom and human rights. Some of these restrictions were eased in the 2010s, but then tightened again in later years. Cuba depended largely on Venezuela for their oil. After the US intervened in Venezuela earlier this year and captured President Nicolas Maduro, shipments of Venezuelan oil to Cuba stopped. And at the same time, the US pressured other countries to stop sending fuel to Cuba, which pushed Cuba deeper into its energy crisis. Now, there's a lot more to tell about this story. As Caribbean people, naturally, the Cubans have been very resilient, but the struggle is still very real.
Jamaica just declined to load fuel onto Cuba's LPG tanker following new US sanctions that penalize any country supplying energy to Cuba. The sanctions mean if you help Cuba with fuel, you risk punishment from the US financial system. So Jamaica stepped back. Jamaica is dealing with hurricane damage right now, which makes energy security even more sensitive and shows how fragile this setup really is. Makes you question the timing also anyway. Right, here's why this matters. Cuba has already warned it is running low on crude. That affects planes, electricity, hospitals, and basic transport. Mexico has stepped in to help, but across the Caribbean, support has gone quiet. And this is where history matters, right? Because for decades, Cuba supported the region through doctors, disaster response, training, and technical support when small islands couldn't afford it. Jamaica relied on Cuban doctors for years, especially in rural areas, and thousands of Jamaicans were trained in Cuba when the system needed them. Now, guys, let's be clear. This is not about pretending Cuba is perfect, all right? We'll put that to the side. Cuba has internal constraints, but sanctions are not about reform. They're about leverage. After the revolution, Cuba nationalized land and industries owned by US interests and was met with long-term economic isolation. Cuba and Haiti are two of the only nations in the region to truly win freedom through revolution, and both have paid for it, seriously. And if that feels distant, look at Burkina Faso today. Reduce foreign military influence, reclaim resources, face pressure and sanctions, same pattern in different regions. Here's the risk, guys. Caribbean governments are calculating access to US banks, dollar clearing, tourism flows, credit lines, and trade preferences. Over 90% of the Caribbean energy is imported, which means pressure travels fast. Countries that help Cuba risk secondary sanctions, restricted access to US banks, higher borrowing costs, and quiet pressure on tourism and credit. These are the same constraints that are already being discussed quietly in policy circles, even if they never reach the headlines. And the lesson from that risk is long-term, right? As long as the Caribbean depends on imported fuel, pressure will always work. As long as they depend on the US dollar, pressure will always work. Venezuela oil kept Cuba afloat for years, but once pressure and production collapsed, that lifeline disappeared. So the strategy is simple, right? Short-term, quiet fuel swaps and port access to keep systems running. Medium-term, maybe CARICOM, coordinated fuel storage and joint procurement, so risk is shared. Long-term, transitioning into energy systems that cannot be switched off externally. This isn't about doing the right thing for one another or being charitable. It's self-defense. Because if we do not move as a bloc and control energy, food and supply chains, our politics can be overridden externally.
When people vote, they vote for hope for safety, hope for jobs, and hope for a better future for their children. And many Cuban Americans, they believe they were voting for strength, security, and protection. They believe tough immigration policies would protect their community, and they believe strong foreign policy would bring change to Cuba. But politics does not always operate the way people expect. Now some families are living in fear, Deportation policies that was just headlines are now knocking on their doors, and suddenly it feels personal. It is easy to support someone when you believe it will affect someone else, and it feels different when it touches your own home. At the same time, Cuba's situation is getting worse. Fuel shortages mean long blackouts, Hospitals struggle, transportation slows down, businesses close early, and families wait in long lines just for basic supplies. When there's no oil, there is no electricity. And when there's no electricity, everything stops. And when Cubans now hear that the US government is planning a peaceful takeover, it brings back painful memories because Cuba has a long history of outside interference. And words like that are not taken lightly. They create fear, anger, and even uncertainty. So for many Cubans, both in the island and in Miami, it feels that they're being caught in the middle. Some feel regret, some feel confused, and some feel defensive. So what this moment really means is that elections are not just about slogans, or even party loyalty. They are about real lives impact. Policies do not check your political party before they affect you. Laws do not ask you who you voted for. And this is not about mocking anybody. It is about understanding that every vote has a power, every policy has an impact, and every decision creates a ripple effect, Many people voted believing that deportations would only target others, and some believed that foreign pressure would only hurt political leaders, but reality is more often complicated. And this is a reminder not just for Miami Cubans and for Americans, but for everybody watching, that before you support any strong promise, ask, who could this affect? How could this grow bigger? Think long term, look deeper, and never assume that policies only affect someone else. So I hope in future, people are going to think critically before they make any choice politically, because elections, they have real consequences. So thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Have a good one. I'll see you in the next video.